I'd just like to introduce myself. My name is Adam Mahoney. I'm the project coordinator with the Conservation Council of New Brunswick. I'll be presenting the webinar today and hosting it with the Ecology Action Center with my colleague Tomas McNeil. If you want to introduce yourself there, Thomas.
Sure, my name's Tomas McNeil. I'm the coordinator for sustainable transportation at the Ecology Action Center in Halifax, and excited to take part in these discussions and hope they lead to more conversations around school bus electrification in Atlantic Canada.
Just a note, we are recording this, so any questions you have along the way, you can put into the chat, and Corey and Thomas will monitor it, and we have a Q&A session at the end. Just a brief rundown, I will do a quick presentation at the start, which will speak to the why of electric school buses, and then Mike and Thomas will speak to the logistics and operational experiences they've had in New Brunswick and PEI. So without further ado, I'll share my presentation. Corey, could you give me hosting privileges, please? Yep. Okay. Welcome to our presentation of electric school buses in the Maritimes. I already introduced myself, so no need to do that again. There we go. So to start, we were funded by the Trottier and ECHO Foundations. CCNB and EAC are working to mobilize grassroots support and government relations strategies for a successful electric school bus adoption. We are part of a broader national group called the Canada Electric School Bus Alliance, otherwise known as CESBA, with like-minded groups working to reach those same goals for electric bus adoption. So some of these groups are Equiterre, Green Communities Canada, CCNB, EAC, For Our Kids, Pembina, and Pollution Probe. And CESBA is growing every week as more groups join. So to introduce our panelists, Tomas Murphy is the Pupil Transportation Coordinator with the Department of Education Early Childhood Development here in New Brunswick. Thomas oversees the management of over 1,200 school buses and the safety of over 75,000 students who are transported daily by our school buses. Thomas looks after the procurement of new school buses and training program for new drivers, as well as policy and budgetary responsibilities on behalf of the department. And Mike Franklin is the logistics specialist with the PEI Public Schools Branch. Mike oversees the training program for the electric school buses. He has 22 years experience in teaching both urban transit operators and school bus operators, as well as 20 years of experience serving in the Canadian Armed Forces as a tank commander, which is something I didn't know about Mike in our previous discussion, so that was really interesting to learn. So why electric school buses? Well, first and foremost, diesel is a human carcinogen. It has a catalog of health effects, including respiratory, cardiovascular, central nervous system, immunological, and reproductive and developmental health. When students are exposed to diesel, they have all these effects from an early age, and then they can develop later in life too. So these are Health Canada numbers, and diesel emissions have been estimated to cause 2.2 million acute respiratory symptom days, 170,000 asthma symptom days, and 3,000 child acute bronchitis episodes every year. So we see a significant health impact from diesel, and not just school buses, but all diesel. But obviously, students, school buses are the main contributor to students' exposure. And these transportation-related air pollutants, such as nitrogen dioxide and fine particulate matter, are associated with cognitive development disorders in school-age children. So an excellent white paper by Pollution Probe released last month, I believe, found that these include slower response times, ADHD, anxiety, and depression. So when a student gets on the bus in the morning to go to school for an early math test, the diesel emissions aren't really helping their cognitive gears get going, so to speak. And diesel, I think we all know, is a contributor to climate change. In New Brunswick, we have a school bus fleet of around 1,250, and that emits close to 22,500 tons of carbon dioxide every year. Nova Scotia has a slightly larger fleet, which makes their emissions slightly higher. So pretty comparable emissions and fleet sizes here in our two provinces. So we need to make smart choices for the environment. By shifting to electric, we can help our provinces meet the challenges of climate change. Every diesel school bus that we remove from the roads is 18 tons of carbon dioxide. So every bus emits 18 tons. And so electric school buses also align with New Brunswick and Nova Scotia's climate goals and their respective climate action plans. So every ton of carbon that we can remove from the atmosphere is a step in the right direction. And we're making smart choices for our children. So we see substantial reductions in school diesel emissions result in a 30% decrease in childhood bronchitis and asthma. So there's a real association between diesel emissions and students' health, as seen in this study, which is fairly recent, 2019. And our bus drivers, we can't forget about them. We had one bus driver report to us how much safer they felt driving an electric bus is given how quiet it is. They told us that because they can spend time listening to the kids behind them instead of constantly having to look up at the rear view, makes for a more safer driving experiences. And we've had other bus drivers tell us that they were experiencing long-term hearing loss, particularly in their left ear, the one closest to the window, as well as other diesel-related health complications. So bus drivers will have long-term chronic exposure and long-term issues. And our kids, the big yellow bus, we all know it, moving around in urban and rural areas is an important symbol for the Maritime's commitment to future generations. Kids, I've been told by bus drivers, are very excited to go on the electric bus, and that they're actually disappointed when it's out for maintenance and they get a diesel replacement instead. So CCNB and EAC have been conducting rigorous stakeholder outreach to understand the perspectives of bus drivers, students, parents, teachers, health experts, and organized labor. We've also been meeting with government departments such as education and early childhood development, environment, and local government, and we are reaching out to transportation and infrastructure. In each instance, stakeholders are enthusiastic about switching to electric school buses, and participants of a recent roundtable on school bus electrification proposed several benefits to adoption. And here are some quotes we pulled out from our recent roundtable with those stakeholders. So here from a bus driver, diesel buses create noise pollution that affects the driver's ability to pay attention to the road. A health expert responded saying children's lungs are less developed, and it's a really critical time to give them cleaner air on the way to schools. You set them up for success for that early math test that I often struggled with as a kid. From a parent, they see it as a symbol of government. Switching to electric shows a clear commitment to a sustainable future and will socialize the next generation of climate conscious residents or climate conscious communities even. A teacher said that the green solution costs less in the end, and the environmental and health benefits stack up afterwards. So we're saving money, not just by switching to diesel or switching to electric from diesel. We're saving money through the environment and through the health benefits. And a student told us this is a big issue. In the long run, it will be cheaper. It's an investment in our finances and our health. They see the environment as a priority, and government has to see that. Electric buses will be reducing CO2 emissions by a large amount, as we've seen. We are not investing in just electric buses. We're investing in a better and brighter future. So we see students even too know the benefits. So where's the market at? The main manufacturers of PE buses as it stands are Lion Electric, Bluebird, Green Power, Navistar, and Tomas built buses. Lion Electric is the major player in our region. They're based out of Quebec and have their manufacturing in Quebec. They are currently hiring for our new facility in Moncton. And a recent press release said that they have capacity for 2,500 buses per year. You know, given supply chain issues that every industry is feeling right now, there might be some problems with that, but they say that, and it's a good step. But there's a cost. There is a cost. We see the total cost after 1 year ownership with a diesel bus in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia is around $131,000, whereas an electric school bus will be closer to $380,000. So a huge gap, almost 3 times higher. So how do we overcome this cost difference? Well, there are a few options. The federal government offers a few funding options. One included the Zero Emissions Transit Fund, which is a $2.75 billion fund to support transit and school bus operators. It will fund 50% for capital projects, so the actual purchasing of the bus, 80% for planning projects to a max of $350 million per project. But it doesn't last forever. The fund runs until 2026. Likewise, the Investing in Canada Green Infrastructure Stream is eligible for climate change mitigation and improved access to clean energy transportation. For provincial projects, the fund will fund up to 50%. PEI, and Mike can speak to this a bit later on, received 50%, $6.3 million for 2 consecutive purchases of 35 electric school buses. So we're seeing these funds have a real effect already. And just an exercise in accounting, we see the payback period with that 50% subsidy. So we look at the electric ownership after 1 year is 191,000 and diesel ownership at 131,000. And they won't reach close to cost parity until 5 or 6 years. So if we can find that extra $60,000 in the first year, they will have cost parity much sooner. And in terms of finding that extra $60,000, I don't know if it will come from internal revenues or from a carbon tax revenue, but there's an opportunity there to boost funding for our school bus purchases. And so what's our role in this? Well, obviously we want to improve children's health and environmental health. We want to help our provinces reach our climate action goals and take advantage of the federal sources. The Maritimes need to make a transition to electrifying its fleet, and through the joint procurement through CAMET, which is the Council of Atlantic Ministers in Education and Training. The reason why we get such a good rate for school buses in the Maritimes is because the Atlantic Canada, I should say, all 4 provinces make joint procurements. So we can do that for electric school buses too. PEI, a leader in this area, is already poised to have 25% of their fleet be electric. And so that's my presentation on the why and a little bit of the how we can do this. I will stop sucking up the air and I'll let our speakers take over. Tomas Murphy, could you go first? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So as Adam said, my name is Tom Murphy. I'm the Pupil Transportation Coordinator here at the Department of Education in New Brunswick. I look at a very high level after the school bus fleet here in New Brunswick. We currently operate 2 line electric school buses, both in the Moncton area, one for the Anglophone district and one for the Francophone district. We acquired these school buses back in 2017. So we were an early adopter for these vehicles. They are a first generation of these buses. And they're already 5 years old, pushing 6 years old. And we typically keep a school bus in the area of approximately 12 years. So these buses are almost midlife. I actually had the opportunity to go look at them yesterday. I was in town and had a chance to go look at them, and they've been holding up actually fairly well compared to most buses. As Adam mentioned, the drivers and the students who use these buses really enjoy them. We keep hearing all the time from the driver how quiet the bus is, how easier it is to manage the students on the buses because it is so quiet. You don't have a big diesel engine clunking in front of you. One of the things that we did learn very early on, because the bus is so quiet, as it goes down the road, you can imagine a big long vehicle, right? It flexes and it cricks and cracks and all that stuff, all the windows, and you can hear every little noise in the back of the bus, whereas a regular bus does still make all those same cricks and cracks. They just don't hear it as much because they got a big clunking diesel engine in front of them, right? But that being said, the electric buses that we do have in our fleet are built to very high tolerances, very high standards, and they do tend to minimize some of those extra noises. Now, being an electric vehicle, it's obviously very quiet going down the road. The biggest noise you typically hear from this thing is usually the road noise from the tires as you're going down the road. Now, we operate these buses in a urban environment, so we operate them in the greater Moncton area. So they're typically rolling at fairly low speeds, so you don't have that typical road noise from the tires. And because of that, Line has thought of that, and they've included basically just a sound generator that can be programmed for when the vehicle is rolling at very low speeds to emit a noise or a sound to make sure that pedestrians and people that waiting at a bus stop, they can hear something, they know that something's coming. Otherwise, it can sneak up on you really easily because it is so quiet. The Line buses come with a little chime. It sounds like an ice cream truck. It's actually the bell tone for the Montreal subway. Lion manufactured the buses with this bell tone because they're manufactured just outside of Montreal, and they wanted something that most Montrealers are familiar with. Sound of the metro. Made sense. But you can change that to whatever noise you want. It's just an MP3 file that can be updated. So anybody considering it in the future, you don't have to stick with just that. You can put something else if you like. And this can be programmed for whatever speed. It can be between 1 kilometer an hour and 20, 25, 30 kilometers an hour, whatever speed range you want this noise generator to come on, you can program that. There's also some neat software updates on these vehicles. As you can imagine, most electric vehicles, they're basically a laptop on wheels. They have a lot of computing power in them, lots of computers to manage the battery pack, thermal management, all that good stuff. And recent software updates have now allowed us to have better telematics from the vehicle and be able to monitor energy consumption, charge rates, discharge. We can monitor how much energy the bus is using over certain kilometers. And the bus can be calibrated to optimize some of that depending on the environment. So if you have very hilly terrain, the bus can be optimized for a little bit more power. Or if you got fairly flat places, well, you can maximize it for some better efficiency and extend your range. These buses also have similar capabilities as electric cars. So they have things like a regen capability, which allows the vehicle to recuperate some of that energy when you're applying the brake. So instead of applying the brake and having brakes engaged to slow down the vehicle, it's just the electric motor working in reverse and recharging the battery, putting some of that kinetic energy back into the battery pack to help extend your range. This gives you an extra few kilometers every little trip. And that's why these vehicles are very well suited for stop and go, right? Because you're recuperating a lot of that energy all the time, and you're not feeling as much of that wind resistance moving at slow speed. So they're ideal for urban environments. Obviously, going down the highway, you don't use the regen feature as much. A school bus is about as aerodynamic as a brick, as you can imagine. So you get a lot of that extra resistance, but they're pretty neat. That being said, we had a first generation bus. Line is now coming out with their third generation of the bus. It obviously has updated features and functionality. One of the main features that's really exciting is the DC fast charge capability on the bus now. So our bus that we currently operate only has a level 2 charge capability, which means it takes 8 hours to fully charge a bus from empty to full. So it takes a good chunk of time for a level 2 charger. The new buses that are being produced now, like I say, have DC fast charge, which allows for level 3 charging. DC charging means it's directly direct current, and it allows to bypass the onboard inverter. So it charges the battery directly. It can do so much faster, and it can charge a bus allegedly in as little as 2 to 3 hours, which is very impressive. That's you're cutting down the charge time quite significantly there, and we're looking forward to seeing that in operation. As Adam mentioned, they are opening a new service center in the Moncton area, and we're looking forward to going checking out some of their new features on their new buses. That's about all I can think of about these electric buses off the top of my head. Is there any questions?
We'll do questions at the end. So everyone write them down or put them in the chat, and then we'll get to them after Mike speaks. So Mike, could you take it away and speak a bit about your experience with your soon-to-be 82 electric school buses on the island?
Hi, I'm Mike Franklin. I've been with the Public Schools Branch for 2 years now. Previously to that, I was with the Toronto Transit Commission for 20 years. So I saw the hybrid buses come in there. I was an instructor there, and we saw the hybrid buses come in first. It was a bit of a challenge because they were fairly new, running a small diesel motor on the back of them to charge the batteries as they went along. So they didn't have to be plugged in, and they'd go as long as you had fuel in the tank. So we moved from there onto electric buses, fully electric buses. And that was just before I left. So when I came down here in 2020, I walked into this job and they told me that they'd purchased 12 new electric buses that were going to be delivered later on that summer. And at first I was a little bit reluctant, thinking that didn't think the technology was here yet to go for that big a purchase, but we thought, you know what, let's give it a chance and see how it goes. So PEI's pretty much got to the point where we've almost gone all in. We purchased 12 in the first round. We received the buses between December 2020 and March 2021. The problem we had was to start with the chargers. So getting the chargers in the ground, exactly what we needed, where we were going to put them, where we were going to run these buses. So we went with the 150 kilometer an hour range. That was great for a lot of the routes inside Charlottetown, and away we went. We had problem with one bus with a battery out of all of them so far, and that got floated back to Montreal. We lost the bus for almost 2 months while they replaced the battery, and then it was shipped back to us. But since then, we haven't had any other major problems with the buses. In June 2021, we put out a tender for 35 more buses. So Lion got the contract again. These buses are still being delivered. They still owe us one more bus. The last one that came down to my area, and I'm out on the east end of the island. So we're using it as a trial to see how well it works in the country. So it's a wheelchair bus. It has 2 wheelchair positions in the bus. The driver couldn't speak any more highly of it. He loves the bus, and he's actually a coach for us, the driver coach. So he's been great about selling it to the rest of the drivers. Now I've got quite a few drivers asking me for next year, if they're getting a new bus, can they have an electric one? The problem we got into was with where can we put the buses? So we want to keep this as environmentally friendly as possible. So we came down to the point, can we put them at drivers' houses? Because that's normally where the drivers park their buses for almost 80% of our drivers. So we had to look at that, see how that would affect what the cost would be for putting in chargers. Can we put them into drivers' homes without costing them too much discomfort? We ended up getting a line put in, our own hydro line put in to the charger from the street, and then we take the bill ourselves. So the drivers aren't charged for the hydro. Their bills, the hydro's billed directly to us. So we can see what each bus is doing. We found that to work out really well with the demand charges on the hydro, because a lot of the hydro companies will charge you extra for extra power if you need it during the day or during their peak times. And we found if we put 2 buses in one spot, we went right to the demand rate pretty much every time. So we liked having one bus here, one bus there. And so far it's worked out good for us. We're pretty happy with that. So when we ordered these other 35 buses, COVID showed up. And well, COVID was going the whole time, but COVID really hit us hard with the supply for parts, and it made it harder for them to build. And so that's why we've had to wait for the buses. Lion also got a contract, I believe, with First Student at that point for 250 buses. So I'm not sure how much that would have slowed us down in getting ours. But the more we go on, the more everybody's taking notice of this and the more people are buying them. So I think that's a positive, because the more they're out there, the easier we're going to get the parts and the easier you're going to be able to buy them, because there'll be more production for them. In January this year, we shut down for the month of January due to COVID, and the buses were parked. So they were all at the depot, they were plugged in. And at the end of the month, we decided that we should see how much effect the cold weather would have on the bus. Because at that point, our temperature down here was -20, -21, and we were looking at -30 wind chill. So I went out myself, fired up the bus, and took it for a drive. So I did a lot of stopping and starting on the highway. So from 0 to 80, back down to 0. I was doing this, checking the mileage to see if the mileage that they were showing us was actually accurate. And we found we were getting just under 70% of what they promised us for mileage, saying that these buses are supposed to have 3 batteries, so therefore that'd be 150 kilometers. I got about 100 and I believe it was about 120 kilometers out of that run. Well, as a rule, we won't take the buses down below 20%, just because we don't want to void the warranty on the batteries. So we don't want to drain the batteries totally. So we try to keep them above 20%. We're actually using the buses this summer to help with move students from Charlottetown and Summerside to Cavendish so they can go work their jobs over the summer. So we're using them as public transit while we have them this summer. So we're not sure how we feel about that as a school board, because how am I going to get my bus back in the fall? What kind of shape is it going to be in after everybody and their uncle's been riding on it with their beach umbrellas and all their sand? So I'm kind of happy and not happy about having that happen, but not my choice. We've gone ahead and ordered another 35 buses, and Lion has gotten that tender, I believe. I know Thomas was knocking pretty hard on the door for that one. The problem we ran into was the phase 2 chargers versus the phase 3 chargers. So the phase 2 chargers, as Tom said, they will run up to, could be up to 8 hours to charge. We found ours to be between 4 and 6 hours for charging from almost flat. We don't let them get down to anything below 20. So we've had a few go down just below 20, but we've had them charge back up within 6 hours. So the phase 3 chargers, as he said, will charge between 2 to 3 hours. The problem is the amount of power it takes to run those chargers. A lot of the rural areas in the island don't have that level of charging, so therefore we're staying at the phase 2 for now. We found the phase 2 works fine. We don't need 2 to 3 hour charge in the most cases. The only problem we're finding is with school trips. We have to be a little more creative on how we schedule buses for school trips. So if the bus was out all morning on its run to pick the kids up, goes to school, and then goes out on a school trip for the day, comes back, and then takes the kids home in the afternoon, that's when we're running into power problems that we might not have enough charge to get the kids home. So we may have to have a spare bus subbed in to do the afternoon run, or if we use a sub bus to do the trip during the day. But we're finding ways around that, and it seems to be working out so far. Pretty much the price that you listed at the start was pretty much right on. I haven't seen too many diesel buses at this point that are much below about $150,000. I know the Internationals are running about 159,000 right now, and to get a bus like that, we were hoping to get 10 to 12 years out of them, and right now we're having a problem with the ones we have. The 09s, the 2010s, 2011s, we're having problems with mostly either a motor problem, because some of the max force engines in the Internationals aren't lasting nearly that long, and we either have to replace the motor or we have to ditch the bus early. And if we ditch the bus early, then that leaves us having to buy more, and right now we're buying more in the electric. So we plan to be all in by within 10 years. We're going to be all electric at that time, by the looks of it right now. There is talk about keeping some diesel buses, but I don't know how far that's going to go. We seem to be pretty committed on keeping it electric. So I'm pretty happy with it. It's worked out well for us, and we're just doing some of the driver training with it now. Much the same as Tom said, that you can start getting some more power back out of the bus by working that gas pedal. So if you start letting off on it, you can use it for braking, and you can also use it to regenerate the battery. So the braking helps a lot. Our maintenance has gone down quite a bit, because to service one of these buses is a lot less than servicing the diesel or the gas buses. You're not doing oil changes. There's a lot less fluid, even though the structure of the bus and the running gear is almost all the same. You use the same suspension. You can end up with the same brakes. We're going to go to an air brake in the next round, where we've been using hydraulic for the last our last three tenders of buses. So we're going to go to an air brake and see how it works. I just want to see if there's any problems with air brakes freezing up without having that big diesel engine around it. So I'm hoping not. And hopefully we'll get back to the air suspension as well, because we've been using just spring suspension on these buses, and out in the country the roads aren't quite as good, so I'd rather have the air suspension for the comfort of the children. But so far it's working out, and we're very happy with it.
Great, thanks, Mike. Are there any other comments from our panelists? Anything you want to add before we go to the Q&A period? All good? Okay, perfect. Well, I got lots of questions, and I'm sure my colleague Thomas does too, but I want to give the floor to our guests in attendance. First, if you have any questions for our panelists here about anything they've talked about today. So from Adam, does New Brunswick have a procurement plan for electric school buses?
So we're working on that right now with our counterparts over on the CAMIT committee. So we do, as Adam mentioned, we do a joint procurement with all the Atlantic provinces. PEI has been doing their own thing with the electric buses already, which is great. And now we're working on getting a feasibility study completed and getting the details all fleshed out on how we can buy and implement these electric buses here in the near future. I don't have an exact timeline, unfortunately. There's obviously a lot of variables at play, but we're getting there.
Just a follow-up question to that. What is the feasibility study looking at? So is it in terms of, is it like province-wide build out, or is it just in rural area or urban area? Sorry.
Well, we're still working on what the scope of work for that feasibility study will be. Part of the application process for the Zero Emissions Transit Fund requires a feasibility study on how we're going to basically use the money to implement electrification of our fleet. So that's what we're working on defining as we speak.
All right, perfect. So we got a question from Kelly here. The comparisons have been for diesel buses, but what about gas? I know Thomas, New Brunswick has experimented with gas. I don't know about PEI, so if you could jump in there about some of the performance differences there.
We have gas buses. We have 2020 Internationals right now with the gas engine with the 8.8 in it. And the problem we're having right now with them is cracked manifolds. I've had every one of the buses go back in for warranty work on the cracked manifolds. So I've lost them for usually about a week to get that done, depending on the parts availability. The cost of maintenance is a lot less on the electric. And I drove a gas bus last Saturday, as a matter of fact, to go to a job fair. And I found the electric buses very comparable, like for comfort, as opposed to the gas. I'm not sure what the emissions difference is on it. I haven't really gone into that as much, but between the electric and the gas, I'd probably, if we're going to buy another round of fossil fuel buses, I'd probably stick with the gas with the 8.8. But I think we're going to stay electric as long as we keep going. I think we may look at another provider, but I don't think we're going to switch off the electrics anytime soon.
Awesome. Thomas, have you looked into any of the emissions comparisons between diesel and gas and electric?
Yep. So we've looked at comparing diesel buses, gasoline buses, and propane buses, as well as electric. The emissions benefits from each one of these fuel sources does vary, as well as the cost, maintenance, and everything. They all have pros and they all have cons. It's just what works best in our application. The gas buses are relatively simple. It's just your basic big block V8. So maintenance is fairly straightforward on them. You don't need a diesel certified mechanic to be able to operate or to work on it, which does help simplify things on the maintenance side. Gasoline and propane also have fewer emissions in terms of your NOx emissions, your particulate emissions. Don't need to worry about diesel exhaust fluid. There's no turbochargers or anything like that. So it does simplify the maintenance, and there are benefits to them. Yeah.
Emily asked, and Thomas answered this for New Brunswick already, but are there plans to access the zero emissions transit funding? So maybe Mike could talk a bit about the decision to go with the infrastructure stream with investing in Canada over the zero emissions transit fund, and if you know if there's plans to use the zero transit fund in the future for future purchases.
I'm not really. That's not really part of my duties. That just goes to procurement, and they're the ones who look after it. We had to pretty much argue with them to get these chargers put into the drivers' houses and look at the price of the chargers to get them installed. And we had to redo Brackley. We redid one of the high schools where we put 12 buses in, Three Oaks High Schools up in Summerside. And that took us quite a bit of work. We found that putting the chargers in groups like that in schools where we're putting in more than two costs us a little bit more money than what it is. It seems to be cheaper to put them into individual drivers' houses than it is to put them in a bunch like that. So, and the other problem too is if you have a driver who lives out rural area, going in pick up the bus, so he's got to drive his fossil fuel car into wherever he's picking up the bus, fire up the bus, drive it out to back to pick up his kids, back to the school, back to wherever you have it parked, jump in his fossil fuel car, go home, and then repeat all that in the afternoon. So you're leaving a lot bigger footprint. You're kind of almost wasting your money having the electric buses and leaving it with diesel there. But I know it's even more with the diesel, but it's just that the convenience too, and then trying to tell the drivers that no, I'm taking your bus away from you at home. You have to buy a car to get to work now. And that's one of the perks that we have with them, and that they can use the bus to it's at their home and away they go, as long as they have a place to park it that's safe. So it just made it easier. I know the transit company that we have on the island that are doing public transit, they've been getting a lot of funding from that program. And I know they're currently using it to buy electric buses as well. And that would be Coach Atlantic.
Awesome. Thank you. Kelly's asking, are there propane buses being used in New Brunswick? An addendum, winter driving, how are the electric for heat? Many diesel lack proper heating.
Yes, we have 16 propane powered buses. Again, they're in the Moncton region because that's where there's the most readily available propane refueling infrastructure. They are excellent. They work very well in cold weather. These are liquid propane buses, whereas you probably heard about propane powered vehicles back in the probably the early 90s and whatnot. Those tended to be vapor fuel, which were not nearly as good performance-wise as they are now. They love the cold weather. They heat up really well. The electric buses, all manufacturers offer basically diesel-fired fuel heaters for their buses. The only exception being Tomas-built buses, which currently use electric heat to heat up their buses. The advantage of having a diesel-fired fuel heater for the electric bus is that it does heat up really quickly and it does provide ample heat in the bus. Whereas your regular diesel bus will need to wait for the engine to warm up and everything before heat starts getting through the bus. Whereas a diesel-fired heater will just start pumping out heat right away.
I have a follow-up question to that. Maybe Mike can take it. What's been your experience with these diesel heaters? How much do you find you're using them in the dead of winter? Is it a lot, or is it a significant amount? We've heard concerns about these diesel heaters with switching to electric.
I don't think you'd want to have them electric just right away, because it'll take away from your range on the buses, so you won't be able to go as far. We looked at the Tomas ones on this purchase with the electric heaters, and we found that it would take away from the range. What we have the drivers doing with the electric is when the bus is plugged in, what you can do is program the bus to turn the heater on. Say you're starting your run at 7 o'clock in the morning, you can program your heater to start at 6:30, and the bus is, the windows are all clear and it's all ready to go for 7 o'clock. Like the heater's going inside. There's nothing better for a driver to get in, sit down in the bus that's already warm, ready to go. So we found that when I drove mid-January at minus 31 wind chill, minus 30 wind chill, I was going into the wind as well, sitting right at the front of the bus. So not a lot of protection on the legs, and the heater worked just fine.
Yeah. Did you find do you know how often you have to fill up the tank, or how much you consume?
I think it's a 100-liter tank, and we're doing it about once a week on the average.
All right, great. Are there any other questions for folks?
I'll jump in with a question if that's all right. This is a question mainly for Mike. So yeah, you spoke about the pilot project that you're conducting where you're placing the charging stations at the homes of some bus drivers. Two questions. So has that already been implemented, that pilot program? And can you still get the lower demand response rates from the utility with that home charging model?
Yeah, we do actually, because the Lion bus takes the same power as if you were to take 5 stoves and turn them all on at the same time. It uses the same power up as 5 stoves do. So you can imagine that in your house. And if we keep it under, the buses charge at 19.2, I think it's kilowatt per hours. I'm not sure on that, but it's just under the demand rate, which for us is at 20, or I believe just over 20. So as long as we're only doing one, and you can charge it pretty much any time, it doesn't go to the demand rate. So it's worked out well for us. We figured out that even if we do have a driver who say they leave after a year, we get them, we give them an electric bus, we put it in their yard, and they decide, you know what, I don't want to drive a bus anymore. So to go take the charger out, to take the cable back, is not that big an expense as compared to what we're paying to put a charger into the depots, where we're doing multiple chargers there, and it's not the same. It's not as nearly as expensive. We found the cost to be almost $20,000 per charger going into the depots, whereas we were putting them into drivers' homes at just over $2,000. So it was a big difference.
Just a follow-up question for Thomas, and we'll get to Brittany's question. Is New Brunswick looking at this home charging infrastructure as a solution to more rural routes, like the island's done?
That's one of the options being explored. So PEI has been sharing their experience with us, and like I said, all options are on the table. We're going to look at to see what's possible. Feasibility study is obviously going to help us determine what the best course of action is for our jurisdiction.
Oh, thank you. So in the chat, since CAMA is electric, or CAMA is Atlantic, do we know if Nova Scotia and Newfoundland are looking at or have procured e-buses? We had hoped to have Thomas's counterpart in Nova Scotia here today, but there's a scheduling conflict. But do you, Mike or Thomas, have a sense of where the other provinces are at this stage?
I had Nova Scotia over, I think it was 2 Fridays ago. Their managers all came over for a visit, and they wanted to take the electric bus for a drive. So we spent the day with them and took the bus for a drive, showed them the charging systems, answered a lot of their questions about what we've gone through, what they need to plan for if they're going to go ahead and make the purchase, and how to get it all in order to do it. So what should be your focus and what works. So looking at the power grids and finding out, can you go to a phase 3 charger? Do you need to go to the phase 3 charger? Can you stick with a phase 2? And basically how well it works for them, like with the distance. So we've got to 4 battery buses as well. So all our purchases in the future are going to be all 4 battery buses. So we're going up to the 200-kilometer range, because most of the buses we need to replace going forward will be rural buses. So, and I was surprised I didn't get this question yet. Can you start the bus with the bus plugged in? And the answer is no, not the Lions, because it's a safety feature, so you don't back out with a cord still in it. But I think the Thomas will do it. So I haven't tried it yet, but I think the Thomas might do it. But the Lions bus, no, you have to plug out. And a lot of the questions we got from Nova Scotia were, if the charging cord was laying in a puddle of water and you walked up to it, would you be electrocuted in that puddle of water? And the answer again is no. We've had a few laying in the puddle of water, because not everybody gets it back into the holder in the charger when they go to take off in the morning. So no, what happens when you plug the bus into from the charger into the bus has to send a signal back to the charger to send the power. Otherwise the two haven't connected and the power won't go through. So, and as soon as you unplug, the charger senses that the signal's lost, so it cuts the power off right away. So they are safe.
Interesting. I hadn't heard of that question before. Question from Nick for Thomas, I presume. How has NB Power been involved with the deployment of e-buses in New Brunswick?
So for us, obviously, we only have 2 electric buses, so their involvement has been very limited at this point. But we have been in talks with them about the deployment of additional charging infrastructure, what that would look like. NB Power actually has a very advanced charging network for electric vehicles across the province. They have an app that you can go on there and you can see charger, if it's working, if it's functioning, if it's available, the type of capacity. You can go on their app. So if you have an electric vehicle, you just sign up for it. You can see all that kind of stuff. And we'll be working with them, obviously, in the future for the installation and deployment of any additional charges if required.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from any of our attendees?
Can I jump in with another one?
You may.
Yeah, I was just sort of curious, and this is sort of a question for Mike and Thomas. But I'll start with Mike. In terms of running these buses on rural roads, to what degree have you been doing that already? And what are some of the challenges that you're anticipating?
Just the mileage really was the big thing, like how long the route was. But another thing we started doing was we're looking at how long these kids are on the bus. I don't want to keep a child on the bus more than an hour. I'd say an hour and a half would be the very longest I want any child riding the bus, because you figure that's an hour and a half in the morning, an hour and a half in the afternoon. That's 3 hours of the child's day. You're sticking them on a bus, and then put them in the classroom for another 6 hours. You're starting to get to the point where back when I was in school, that's going pretty much cruel. So we're trying to cut some of the routes down so it's not quite as long, and it's worked out pretty good. I've got a lot of my rural drivers now asking for the bus, for electric buses, and I've got the one that I have out here on my end. It is running on a rural route, so it's but it's not using as much power as I thought it was going to be. It's only going down to about 22% in the morning run and 22% in the afternoon. So even going to a 4 battery bus, I probably could have got away with a 3 battery bus and still done the same, but it's worked out pretty good. That driver I have doing, he's also a volunteer firefighter. So it's, we had a lot of questions from the fire departments. What about if this bus catches fire? And we showed him how to disconnect the batteries quickly. There's a cutoff switch inside and outside the bus. And there's also a cutoff switch for the heater. So if you need to switch the heater off quickly due to a fire, then it's right by the driver's foot. So the switches for the batteries, one's by the driver's left foot and the other's outside just underneath the driver, underneath the window in a cabinet there. So it's quick disconnect. It works great. They wanted to go with blue bumpers to show that they're electric, but D250 said that no, we're not supposed to do that. That's the standards for school buses. And now we're going to kind of challenge it to say that because these are electric buses, we'd rather have the fire department know that they're dealing with electric power as opposed to a fossil fuel if there is a problem with the bus where it does catch fire. So we'll see what happens with that one.
Could you just explain what D250 is for those who don't know?
D250 is the standard. They're the ones who say across North America that all school buses have to look exactly like. You'll notice every school bus looks exactly like. They have, it's chrome yellow bus. So they indicate what the color shade has to be exactly. Black lettering, the letters that say school bus, the flashing red lights and yellow lights on the bus. Basically the standards is how a bus has to be built and exactly what specifications are supposed to be on every bus. So they give the minimum standards, and if you don't have it to that standard, you cannot operate it as a school bus. So it's a pretty good list, and they're pretty specific as to exactly how they want the bus to look. So people know that's a school bus, and there's no questions.
Okay, awesome. I think we have time for a couple more questions. There's one in the chat here. Has existing mobile charging technology on trailers been considered to bridge gaps where permanent infrastructure is not in place? So question for both of you.
We've thought about it because we had one bus get low once, and we thought about if we put a generator on a trailer, would that be good if we had to go out to just charge it in place? And so far we're not ready to pursue that. We'll flatbed it in before we pretty much do that. Our buses, we can tow them from the back, but we've pretty much prefer to flatbed them at this point because we don't want to mess with the warranty. Since we're the ones basically doing our own warranty work, we're charging back to Lion right now because Lion doesn't have the facilities to do our warranty work for us. So right now we're no to portable charger, but it's a thought for the future.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay. Then I think we could end a few minutes early. We're at 10:56, so that's a pretty good time to hit it at. I want to thank you all for attending. I think this has been a super informative webinar. Our panelists are extremely knowledgeable in everything school bus. So I want to thank Mike and Thomas for their attendance and for taking the time out of their day to share their knowledge with us. Without further ado, I want to say thank you again, and everyone have a nice day. Here in Fredericton, it's really nice out. I hope it is the same in your areas too. Goodbye. Nice to see you.
Thanks so
Bye,
much
everyone.
for everybody.